IoT, has anybody come across the term IoT? IoT stands for the Internet of Things. So you've heard talk of having smart fridges, where the fridge can tell you when it's running low on things inside it and it could do your shopping for you. Those connected devices are called, well, they comprise what we call the Internet of Things. And it's an odd area of technology because IoT devices are normally invented and put to market by people and companies who aren't naturally tech companies. So to give you a big example, have you heard of John Deere? They make tractors. They're a massive, massive agricultural machine equipment manufacturer. So what they do, they are an IoT company. They are a tech company. What they do and what they've developed is that tractors obviously need to be in massive fields these days. So they use satellite tracking to control those tractors. So you don't necessarily need a guy sitting in a tractor on a huge field, ploughing it, digging it up, whatever, for hours on end. They can control them via satellite. So the technology that they've developed helps solve a human problem, but it turns an agricultural equipment manufacturer into a tech company. But what it doesn't necessarily do is give them the tech expertise to think about all of the issues that sit around what they're developing. So if you get a traditional tech company, somebody who makes a computer, they understand the need to make it secure. They understand the need to make transparent portals for people to be able to share different devices with it. So they understand the protocols that sit behind it. They understand the technicalities of it. Companies like John Deere are really good because of their innovation, but they represent a risk because they don't necessarily understand the background to technology to know where they place people at risk. And that very much goes now for companies that are inventing and developing IoT solutions because they don't understand what's going on from a technology point of view all the time. That's why it's so easy to break into an IoT device. So I've got a friend who, she's very techie and she's actually got a data cabinet in her home. So she's got, you know, a proper rack with patch panels in it in her home. But one of the pieces of kit she's got is a shower that is controlled by her smartphone. So she can set the temperature, she can set how long people can have a shower for, she can do all sorts of things remotely with it. Now that's really clever and it's a lovely thing to have to play with, but I bet you a lot of money that that could be broken into really quickly because the company that will have developed it will have been a shower manufacturer, not a technology manufacturer. I have a client, one of my clients, who actually is up in Stoke and they sell fans. So you wouldn't think they're a technology company. All they do is, you know, import fans, they sell them. Some are really small, some are huge, great industrial fans. But they've come up with an IoT solution, which is that, you know, when you go into a newsagent and they've got the big fridges with cold cans of Coke and stuff in them, those are normally left on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, because people want a cold drink when they go in. The trouble is, there's a lot of wasted electricity in keeping that fridge on for all the time that there is, because it doesn't need to be. Overnight, when the shop's shut, you don't need a cold drink because nobody can go in and buy it anyway. So what they've come up with is a remote application that will allow them to control when the fan comes on to cool the drinks and when it goes off. And that will then report back if it gets too hot or if it gets too cold. And it will report back if there are any problems with the fridge so that they can send somebody in to perform maintenance to get it back operational properly. Now, when I said to the guy, that's really clever, what have you done with security? He looked at me like I was on Mars because he hadn't thought about it. Because why would he? That's not his primary issue. His primary issue is solving his customer's problem, which is that, you know, they're having to pay for electricity 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days of the year, when they don't need to. So he can save his customers a lot of money with the solution he's got. But if it's not secure, then at some point that device could be hacked. Who's got Alexa or anything like that? You know, the devices that you can talk to and you can ask them questions and they say, I'm sorry, I don't understand that half the time. But those devices, they are an IoT solution. They're not a computer. They are a thing that's connected to the internet. And what Chinese researchers have now been able to do is develop something called Dolphin Attacks. Now, dolphins communicate using ultrasound. Devices, IoT devices that you speak to, hear ultrasound. We don't. IoT devices do. So what Chinese researchers have been able to do is to control devices like Alexa using ultrasound. So they can shut them down, they can start them up, they can give them commands and things to do. A lot of the benefit of an IoT device, certainly in a home environment, is that you can talk to it. You can turn your alarm on, you can turn your CCTV on. You can watch things, you can see what's going on. If we've got people who can communicate with those devices using ultrasound that we don't hear, they can take down all of your security. Who's heard of smart cities? So in America, it's coming over here, but in America, there's a lot of investment going on in developing what they call smart cities. So smart cities will have control over utilities so that people can control the amount of electricity they use, the amount of water they use, they can see it, they can look after their bills. Buildings are being designed so that when you walk into them, it will light up the rooms that it needs to light up and no more. Heating will come on when it's needed, but not if there aren't any people in those rooms. It will know where people work, it will know where there are training rooms, it will know where there are meeting rooms, and it will light them up and it will heat them accordingly, and otherwise it will keep them out of the way of using utilities. Because that way we reserve our natural resources that we're using up at a vast rate for heating, for lighting, for water, electricity and all the rest of it. So smart cities are on their way. Smart buildings in the UK are becoming much, much more common. So if you see a big developer who's looking to put a big office block in or block of flats in, they are building technology into the core infrastructure of their buildings, because that way they're future-proofing it. So everything becomes electronically controlled. So if you've watched Terminator, we come in. So the Internet of Things is all about connected devices around the world. Not computer equipment, it's things rather than computer equipment. If you look at what we're developing more commonly at the minute, it's around personal IoT devices. So things that help us on a personal level rather than a work level. So, you know, if you've got a fridge, a smart fridge that can tell you when you're out of milk or butter or cheese or whatever, and it can put that on the shopping list and it can order it so that it's delivered for you. You know, that's convenience. What we're buying with that kind of technology is convenience as a person, where, you know, we've got a lot of things that take a call on our time and we want it to be really easy when we go back at home. But IoT in the future will come a lot more into the commercial world as well. So if you look at transport systems, you look at railways, the amount of time it takes to try and maintain rail track, because it takes a person to go down with a bit of equipment and run down, well, not run, but walk, you know, go down the rail tracks looking for problems with that rail to see whether or not it's eroded or whether there are any weak areas or stress points in it. It takes a long time. So consequently, it doesn't always happen, which means then we get rail delays because the track breaks down and they have to perform repairs in a reactive situation. You look at an IoT solution where you can put sensors on the tracks And those sensors monitor the stresses and the strains in that track and then report back if it's outside of certain tolerances. They then know where to go and fix it. They can do it proactively before it becomes a problem and it stops us as a consumer being able to travel from A to B because that line's down. So it makes them far more effective and it makes really clever use of technology. But again, you need to make sure that it's protected because you don't want erroneous signals going back. You want to make sure that the measurement of the stresses is real, the reporting back is very real.